The right to vote in the United States is fundamental. So when we think about the founding of the United States, it was founded because there were things that were being decided for us across an ocean that we had absolutely no say in whatsoever. So when I think about the right to vote, I think about it as a foundational measure that sets up the United States to be what it ends up being. When you turn 18 here in the United States, you can register yourself to vote. You go into your Secretary of State or your DMV office, and you sometimes fill out a little card, name, address, show your ID. But it wasn't always in that way. If you were a person of color, particularly a Black person, there were barriers that were put up in order for you to be able to vote.
African Americans during this period did not have their full access to the vote, even though on paper they did via the 14th, 15th, and 19th Amendments. However, African Americans were barred their access to the vote in a number of ways. For one, you might have a literacy test, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, which made it so that if your grandfather was able to vote, you were able to vote, which of course for most African Americans at the time was not valid. You might have a bar of soap. How many bubbles are in this bar of soap? And the point is to make it as ridiculous as possible so that those folks who are trying to register end up getting discouraged, end up getting turned away. Voting becomes a major issue for African Americans for a number of reasons. Not having the right to utilize that American right doesn't sit well with most people. The voting rights movement in Selma, Alabama had several major figures and organizations.
I think the one that sits on everybody's mind first and foremost is the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He seems to be the face of the movement.
People like Dr. King are great mobilizers, but ultimately the power lies within us, the people. There's no better representation of the activities of everyday people than the Selma voting rights movement. And that is really embodied in the story of Dr. Sullivan and Richard Gene Jackson, of whose home was open to the world by opening it to their dear friend, Dr. Martin Luther King, who stayed with them during the height of the Selma voting rights movement.
A lot of people wonder why Selma, why this tiny little town in Alabama. There was a lot of tension that was happening in this area. Groups like SNCC had already been on the ground in Selma doing the work, trying to register people to vote. There's a march that's organized between a number of the groups on the ground there in Selma. And the march is going to be from Selma to Montgomery. They start the march, they get to the infamous Edmund Pettus Bridge, and violence erupts.
They were attacked, harassed, beaten by Alabama State Police. Hundreds of people were injured. The fallout from this was tremendous. So with the passing of the Voting Rights Act, these challenging barriers are made illegal.
We needed the 1965 Voting Rights Act to ensure that everybody, women, men, Black, white, and myself as an Indigenous person, benefits also from the 65 Voting Rights Act because we're all now able to cast our ballots.
One of the most uniting factors of the civil rights movement, but especially the Selma voting rights movement, is ordinary people putting everything on the line for our collective benefit.
So what are you willing to put your life on the line for? What are you willing to walk for, march for, or lay down for?